and welcome to this month's ID update. We've got a great show for you this evening. We think, maybe, perhaps, who knows?
Maybe.
But we've got some interesting topics, and some people are here, which is lovely. Do throughout the show join us in the comments. Let us know where you're joining from, maybe what you didn't get done this week that you really needed to get done. I've got an article that I'm supposed to be writing for someone, and it's due today, so I guess that's my job once we're done here. Heidi, how are you doing? How was your month?
Oh yeah, it's almost April, isn't it? Other than feeling like this last week was 3 weeks long, I too have some writing to catch up on this weekend, and some research and some community. I have a lot of work to do this weekend, so.
Nice. That's what else are weekends for, right? Other than just
Exactly.
continuing the work week. That's been my experience the last too many years. Thanks for jumping into the chat. We've got someone from the Rocky Mountains. Nice to have you with
Ooh.
us. So we have got as our main topics for today EdTech acquisitions and the second education exodus. I think this is kind of pretty much like a one each week, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
So that's quite nice. But equally, we would love to hear from you about what questions you've got, what topics you're thinking about at the minute. So do throw them in, and we'll discuss them along the way. But beyond that, let's jump into topic one: EdTech acquisitions. Organizational finance isn't exactly like a riveting topic. And like the purchasing of companies. And I actually got a message from someone going like, why are you talking about EdTech acquisitions? Like,
Really?
this is an instructional design channel, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you haven't watched many of the videos if you think this channel is really about instructional design. Like almost all of it is like ID adjacent. But we talk about a lot more than just that.
Of course.
But
And I think
so
EdTech really is instructional design, isn't it? I know that at least for me in my PhD program, when we did the fundamentals of instructional design, guess where we started? EdTech and educational media, right?
I think it certainly plays a huge role in it. And I do understand, though, why the idea of, some company has acquired another company, I could understand why someone might go day to day, that does not impact me. And probably
Fair.
day to day, it probably doesn't. But given the impact of EdTech, the tools that we have, the platforms we rely on, the background stuff we don't even realize we're using in our role, this stuff has a huge impact on our ability to do our jobs well. And so it's kind of worth knowing where the landscape lies. And for those of you who watched the ID update 2+ years ago, me and Joey used to talk a lot about like who's buying who. Because this was kind of halfway through the pandemic when people kind of realized this L&D industry, there's a lot of money to be made here. And so venture capital companies started getting their claws in, shall we say, and extracting value, which is, of course, what companies are best at doing.
Of course. And I think EdTech companies have also changed the way that they market and sell as well. Like they're using a lot of social media tactics that we see in other industries, a lot of influencer tactics we see in other industries, a lot of collaboration and partnership types of deals, right? And so they're kind of starting to go a little bit more mainstream as it gets more popular. So it does really impact a lot of people, even if they don't realize it, because there's so much out there that's being pushed to you as an ID, whether or not you know it. If you're active on LinkedIn, if you're active on other social media talking about ID, those ads are coming your way.
100%. And actually, that's quite an interesting addition to this conversation, maybe about about how we interact directly with EdTech companies and where we get our information from. But I want to start with a bit of a chat around this merger situation. And the reason it pops into my head this week is that we saw what did they call it? A joining. So Butter has joined Miro. Now that language really confused me when I saw it.
Same.
Um, and I spent quite a while trying to figure out what that means, because Miro is not a club.
Right.
Like, is this just an integration? Is, what
I thought it was an integration at first.
this isn't?
Yes.
It's not. Um, but they are now going to be in some weird form, one company or a group or something. I don't quite know what the legal setup will be, obviously. But what I also saw was people greeting this news and that clarification really positively. Which, to be clear, I'm not saying is wrong, but it did puzzle me slightly. Because, I like Miro, I like Butter, I use both of them. They're fantastic tools. They play in a lot of the same spaces. One of the reasons I like having both of them, in the same way that I like having Intel and AMD as manufacturers of CPUs, and I like the fact that NVIDIA and now Intel as well all produce GPUs in the computer space, is that competition is really, really good. Um, Competition is the only reason you actually have forever, I don't know, reducing a price or making a better product or offering better customer service or innovating and improving over time. If there is no competition, what reason does a business have to get better or offer additional value?
Yeah.
Lack of competition has a word, it's called a monopoly, and we all recognize that as a bad thing straight away. Now, obviously, Miro buying Butter is not creating a monopoly in the online facilitation space. Of course it's not.
Of course.
But I would argue they were the two most interesting players. Um, and now only having one interesting player rather than two, to me as a consumer, is not a good thing.
Sure.
And the thing that struck me was that I realized that a lot of the positivity, and I can't put this out strongly enough, I don't have an issue with the people being positive about it. That's a choice. And this is very much like the world according to Tom that you're currently hearing. So I'll stop talking in a minute. But they have very close ties to one or both of the businesses involved, either very friendly relationships or affiliate relationships, or just very good working relationships, and
Sure.
that's awesome. I have companies that I've got really close long-term relationships with, that I either do paid or unpaid stuff with, or that I just like. But I don't think I would ever want to see any of them be acquired or acquire others, which is probably why I'm a terrible business person, because that's the end goal for a lot of these businesses, I know.
Sure.
But I do get concerned whenever this happens that we don't keep an eye on this enough, and a lot of EdTech and L&D companies have done a lot of acquiring. Doesn't make them bad, but it does mean we need to watch our space to realize how many things are owned by such small numbers of organizations. E-Learning Brothers owns a lot of authoring stuff and a lot of platform stuff. Other companies, not Chivo, Omniplex has bought up smaller providers over the years. I think Chivo has acquired like an AI platform in the past to bring that to there. And I don't think we have any like egregious players. Probably Learning Pool is pretty sizable, and I think has bought things to kind of make them go away before. And that's kind of the behavior that I worry about the most. It's the Adobe buying Figma, because Figma is a slight annoyance to Adobe XD, so we'll just kill that.
Right.
Luckily, they didn't. They were stopped, but they would have.
Sure.
Make no doubt about it. It's I think part of it is understanding what our relationship is to these companies. I am friends with some of the people in companies, but I always try quite hard to remember why companies exist.
Yeah.
It's not to be nice. It's not to help me. It's to take money off me and anyone else they can get money from. And I say that as the owner of a company.
Yes, of course.
It's, I think often when you say that, it's, that's companies are bad. It's like, no, companies are companies. They are there to collect money from other people and give it to the people running the company. That's fine.
Right.
But knowing that that's the relationship's really important. Like,
Yeah.
I do these webinars for Thirst every month. Really, really good fun. Really like the team there, Fred and Barry especially, who I've had exchanges with. Lovely, lovely people. But my relationship is with them. My contract is with their business, and that is a legal and
Correct.
financial contract. My
Yes.
personal relationship with Barry and Fred is obviously part of the mix, but is not part of the contractual relationship. There is no financial obligation between us as individuals, all that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's super important. I know I've been talking for a long time, but I wanted to kind of set out the why I think this space is interesting argument.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts, Heidi? Are you kind of thinking something different or similar or in between or?
No, I think I agree with you. And I think it goes beyond just the risk, right? Of losing the innovation, right? Losing the scrappy little players. I think it goes a little bit above and beyond that to also when you have large ed tech companies, a lot of times their roadmap is dependent on their biggest customers, right?
Yes.
So if they've got a Fortune 500 company who wants a certain feature and has been asking for a certain feature, at some point they have to add that to the roadmap so they don't lose that business, right? And so when you have these smaller companies joining these larger companies, the agenda becomes different, right? Which is kind of what I think you're saying, right? But the agenda becomes different not only financially, but also in the way that it impacts the end users. And my least favorite kind of acquisition is when an ed tech, small, innovative company gets acquired by another company that's not ed tech who just wants to use that ed tech product for their company.
Yeah.
And then it gets lost to the rest of the people who would have used that, right?
Yeah, this is it, and it's really interesting because we've got kind of like this the L&D or edtech space especially is often described as incestuous, um, because it's a lot of the same people in a lot of different products at different times, and you can usually see certain people's fingerprints across
Absolutely.
multiple platforms
Yeah.
or authoring tools and multiple people's influence. Um, I find it quite amusing when you see the same people doing the same things but for different people. I have a good laugh with someone on a regular basis who is a product manager who always seems to get the same topic given to him at every company he goes to because they're just about to go in and are like, let's get him in. And that exists in other industries, to be
Oh,
clear.
yeah.
You hear names like Pat Gelsinger and things like that. He moves between tech companies, not so much anymore. I think he's now retired, but basically going, "Hi, I'm a genius. Would you like me to fix that problem for you?"
Yeah.
That's fine, but that isn't the norm. I don't think in our space. I
Yeah.
think especially at the minute, what we tend to see is these small, very innovative, very kind of high potential to change the shape of what content authoring, let's say, is in the space, get very, very quickly snapped up by larger organizations. And part of me is like, I get it as a defense mechanism, but that's also probably why some authoring tools look the same as they did 6, 7, 10, maybe years ago. Whereas in any other industry, you'd be like, wow, that technology's old. Why are you using that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
It's
really good point.
um, there we go. David Glow, cannibalistic, maybe slightly better than incestuous in this context. Maybe so.
Fair
Yeah,
point.
that's true. And the thing is, like the movement of talent is good. It's absolutely good. It spreads ideas. It spreads ideas. But I do think that we run a risk, and this is especially true right now. And I think why it's important right now. We've got a lot. Like the generative AI tool space has exploded. Understandably, it's never been easier to start an ed tech company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of I'm going to say this, and it's not throwing shade. It's never been easier to get your hands on a lot of money in terms of funding either. Now, that does not
Correct.
mean it's not an achievement. It's still an achievement if you manage to fund a company. Of course it is. But there's a lot of money in venture right now actively looking to spend into EdTech.
Yes. Yeah.
And which also I'm always very impressed with companies that don't take it. And that choose to bootstrap and do their own thing. I think that, it doesn't guarantee success, obviously, but I think it's interesting, that different mindset.
Yeah.
But with all of that also comes the expectation of much quicker returns. Like, the classic is, a venture capitalist will sell you as soon as they think they can make enough money. And fundamentally, that's what venture is, right? These people are not backing it because they believe in the future of learning design or have a deep stake in what you're trying to achieve. They view it purely as a financial proposition. Again, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it does shape what the decision is going to be. Do we build the feature that's best for the user? Or do we build the feature that we think is going to sound great for marketing now because AI is the big thing, or whatever's the big thing moving forwards? For a short period of time, it was blockchain and micro-credentialing. Everything was going to have one of those modules installed into it. Those who did, quite notably, we commented on at the time, were generally venture-backed. Those who didn't tended to be passion projects from people who really knew what they were talking about. That's not always the case, but it is relatively easy to observe that in the space. So yeah, there's not really like a finite point on this. I just sort of thought, I've had so many conversations in the past couple of weeks about this. Then there was the Butter and Miro thing. I just thought, let's have a conversation, see if other people are thinking about this, or if not, is it something they're interested in? Yeah, I'm not sure I've really got anything else on that one, to be honest.
Fair enough. I wanted to bring up, though, information literacy.
Yes.
It's a little bit seemingly outside of this topic, but it's not. I'll bring it back in. In a past life, I worked as an information literacy professor. And if you're not familiar with that, it is basically I taught young people how to determine whether what they found on the internet was valid, reliable, truthful, and etc. Right? And my favorite part of that class, I always tell this story because I just like it, was that at the end of the semester, when we were having our reflections and we were talking about what we learned, one of my students, a young woman, got up and said, "I'm grateful for this class because I learned that not everything on Google is true." And she was not kidding. She was very serious. And so I think what is important is to understand, like David said in the comments, follow the money, because some of these venture capital backed EdTech companies are lying their way into the space. Okay. And it's really important to be able to see that. And a lot of people can see it, right? Like we're a smart bunch, I like to think, in L&D. So for instance, I just saw on the instructional design subreddit, and I hate to bring that up because I really don't like the instructional design subreddit. And I don't like to spend a lot of time there because it's a very negative place. But there was a post that was basically saying, we've talked to, it was someone pretending to be an L&D professional, right? And they said, we've talked to a bunch of other Fortune 500 companies and they're all getting rid of their LMSs for LLMs. And, there's this big push and this big move. And if you're using an LMS in a year or two, you're going to be left behind, right? It was fear mongering, like fear tactics and like this FOMO idea. And in the comments, it started to unfold that this was a VC-backed company that had actually posted this, pretending to be a learning and development professional, even though the people who are, it's surprising to me because I have not seen, I would say it's an 80-20 split, and I could be wrong, but this is just what I've seen anecdotally, that 80% of the ed tech companies that are venture-backed are not L&D background people, right? And my problem is that's not an issue in and of itself, right? A lot of people start ed tech companies without the background, but my problem is that they have no desire to learn it. They have no desire to learn what we're doing every day. They have no desire to have user testing done by actual practitioners in the field. They would rather just lie their way into our wallets, and it's not going to fly in L&D, right? Like, because we're a small industry. Reputation is massive. The only reason I know about that Reddit post is because another person who works with ed tech companies emailed it to me and said, "Oh my gosh, look at these people being bad again," because we've talked about the same company before. And it's really a small world, because then I turn around and I send it to another friend, and then they send it to another friend. And before you know it, that company has a very negative reputation.
Yeah, I mean, it happens regularly. I've worked in a couple or a few now actually of edtech companies, and I've always tried to. Well, I have always been, I would argue, very open and direct about. I'm working here. I'm now doing something with these people. This is what the deal is, and it's definitely happened that I've got a message back from within the community going, "Hey, are you aware of this? This is going on from the business that you're in or whatever." And I've definitely had to go, "Oh, I'm leaving," because you hear back from people in the industry, and we are a big but small industry. I always like to think we have a lot of reach, but I think that's because often there aren't many of us in any one place. Like every business has some of us, but some businesses have like two, and so we spread out very quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Also an issue with acquisition. When a learn tech company is acquired by a tech company, the focus is often a rounding error and gets deprioritized.
It's true.
I mean, the difference between ed tech and tech is really interesting. Because I've certainly found myself working in an environment where I've just gone, this is a tech company. Like we sell to the ed tech space, but we're a tech company and we're behaving like a tech company, and that's fine, but it's quite different.
Of course.
Quite notably
It is different. It is different.
Like they're famous for that phrase, "Move fast and break things." And I don't think I made many friends, but I said in L&D, that's like how you get fired. Like
that's true.
Because
we don't have the runway that other industries have, other departments have, right? We aren't given the runway, and I mean, I think that's like a greater just L&D reputation problem in organizations, period, right? Because I've worked on both internal L&D teams, but also customer education. And oh my gosh, everybody loves customer education teams. They welcome them. They want to build them. They want to, everyone wants to work with the customer education teams. And it's a very different vibe than internal L&D. We don't have that reputation.
But when you look at the world that we come from, we are, we style ourselves as the L&D industry, but in most organizations, we are the training department.
Yes.
Which actually I don't particularly dislike inherently. I quite like the term training. I think it's more accurate to what we generally do. But I do think that should tell us about the risk appetite.
Sure.
We are there as a risk reduction function. We protect the business. There is a reason we were previously lumped in, or our office are lumped in with HR. We are risk mitigation and reduction.
We are compliance. Yes. We are cover your ass.
Often this is it. And I don't inherently think that's a bad thing. I think ed tech companies could learn from that a little bit.
Sure.
In the tech as a whole, I get the move fast, break things, learn, rebuild, all that kind of thing on board. But when that mentality meets the real world of working in L&D, there's a reason it's jarring. There's a reason many ed tech companies or tech companies making ed tech products feel very different to L&D as we know it. And I think that's the difference. It's that risk appetite. Whereas, I think experimentation should be the thing that kind of aligns with both. We
Sure.
should be able to say, hey, actually, what is experimentation for? Well, experimentation in a business context is about increasing certainty and reducing risk.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So we've both got that in common. Only they couch it in this move fast and break things terminology, whilst we would say move cautiously and try not to upset anyone. It's
Yeah,
the other way.
even in buying decisions, right? So,
Mm,
I mean, I'm working for an ed tech company right now, Parta, right? And the amount of times that people are like, "Oh, well, this is kind of like not a fully baked," and I'm like, "I said it's not a fully baked product. We're just getting started. Like, yeah, it has functionality, and like we're constantly improving it. There's a 3-week roadmap, right? Like." And it's just people aren't willing to, as David said in the comments, let go of 20 plus year specs, standards, processes, software. Nobody is willing to let that go and innovate. And I think you're right. I think we're too risk averse because we've had to be, right?
yeah. And I think we're at that point, and it'll shock no one to hear me talking about experimentation. It's my whole thing at the minute. But I do think it's we spend so much time talking about what we can learn from elsewhere and blah 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 blah. Every other part of the business operates like this. The business you work in probably started with business experimentation to validate the idea of the business.
Sure.
It would be if we were able to adopt being experimental, I would almost argue in place of our current approach of really relatively heavy needs analysis. And
Sure.
no, businesses don't want to give us the time to do that, right?
Of
In the
course.
same way that as a product manager, the holy grail is to be given 6 months to go and investigate customer and market fit and all these kinds of things and then shape the product. No one's ever had that in the history of product management, usually because you join a company that's already launched the product, or the marketing team has designed a product that they think people want and have started marketing it even though it doesn't exist yet. That's often how these things go. That's perfectly normal. The job of the product team becomes, how do I act as an intermediary between this imaginary thing and developers going, that can't exist for these reasons. um, you know Experimentation is the answer to that. It's what's
Yeah.
the smallest thing I can answer this week to move us one step forwards and reduce risk. um, if we worked a bit more like that in our projects, maybe not a week at a time, maybe a day at a time, maybe an hour at a time, whatever level of experimentation work we did, we would align ourselves a little bit more with the space that has probably the biggest impact on what we do, being EdTech, and hopefully be viewed a bit more positively by the organization.
Yeah.
No. Did Another one, David, you're very active. Performance domains matter. Build software, experiment, and try is great. Commercial flight, surgery, mortgage lending, no thanks. Absolutely. This is, but this is the interesting area where it's not experimentation as a whole. I would argue that goes away. It's scope and scale. So we do experimental surgeries. We just don't do them often, and they are, broadly speaking, one of two types of experimental surgeries. Either very small iterative change, i.e., we're going to use a silicon graft rather than a nylon graft, or whatever, or they are full on, nope, you're probably going to die, but at which point this might save you, it might not. Shall we give it a go? That people opt into. But again, it comes down to risk appetite, right? If there is nothing that can save me except the 1 in 1,000 chance that this experimental surgery offers, that 1 in 1,000 looks a lot better than 0.
Sure.
If, however, it's something routine and I can choose the almost guaranteed survival or 1 in 1,000, I'm going to choose the almost guaranteed. Yeah, it's, I think it's the scope and scale that changes as opposed to the absolute removal of experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we move on from the EdTech space, I got an interesting question that I got asked this week on it,
Thanks.
kind of related. Sparked a lot of conversation. We kind of mentioned it before. It goes into two spaces. One is weird and slightly odd parasocial relationships over the internet. It's it's really odd when someone comes up to you and acts as if they know you, even though they don't. And it happens to everyone at some point, right?
Sure.
But I think if you're quite active on LinkedIn or you do webinars, it happens to you a little bit more. And I was reflecting this week, I've totally done it to someone. Like the first time I got to meet Will Telheimer in person, I went up and I was the creepy person that was very much like, oh, I've always wanted to meet you, and he's probably like, who the actual fuck is this? Would you
Meanwhile, you have his book behind you. So it's like, right? Like you're like, I'm a Will
fan. Yeah, no, this. I didn't have it like with me pending signature or anything like that. But yeah, you always have these little things, but it's a weird thing to have that in a very small kind of industry. And that in itself raises the other question of, and this links back to the EdTech stuff, how do we act with really clear kind of lines? How do we maintain integrity when, like, for instance, I've got, relationships with Thirst, iSpring. I've worked in multiple EdTech companies. Meanwhile, I'm, for instance, here on this channel making, suggestions about EdTech and that kind of thing. How do we maintain integrity? And I'm interested actually in your thoughts, because this is what I'm thinking about it a lot at the minute, about how I can improve that. And I don't think I'm not hiding anything, but I'm kind of thinking like, how do I do a better job of being more like, this is the thing, a bit like a kind of, I don't know, statement of interest, if you will, to say, hey, I have an agreement with the following company. This is what that looks like. And part of my brain is like, you are not important enough to worry about that. Get back in your box. But another part of me is like, I don't know, if one person takes my advice, then finds out that I worked for, or am doing a paid sponsored thing with whoever, where does that then leave it? So yeah, sorry, I'll keep going on. What are your thoughts? How do you deal with that? Because you do a lot of this stuff as well, right?
Yeah. So it's hard because, like, for instance, my friend Lata just did a whole program, and it was very easy because I was an affiliate of that program. So, and especially because she's based in Australia, she was like, you have to put an affiliate disclaimer. We don't have to do that in the US if we are, as far as I know, because I've talked with Ash and Han about this from Mass Marketing before, because they were saying that you guys have to say when you're an affiliate of something. And I don't think, because I know so many people that don't say it in the US, that I can't imagine that if it is a law, it's not enforced, right? Like, it's not really being enforced. But like, so I was able to say that I was an affiliate of that program. But when you're doing like a sponsored webinar, it's different, right? Because you're not getting a portion of that revenue. You're not an affiliate. You're not necessarily a partner. You may do one webinar with one company once and never do things again. That's happened to me a handful of times. But I really, in transparency, but also because I did a lot of stuff for free when I was first getting into the industry and trying to make a name for myself and starting my podcast and trying to be a respected voice, right? And that has now shifted to where I'm getting paid to do that, right? And I want people to know that you can get paid to do that, and you don't have to do labor for free, because there are organizations in L&D that use predominantly free labor. Right? They're not really willing to pay, and they have the money to pay. And I'm thinking of a very specific one right now that I'm not going to say, but they have the money to pay and they consistently don't pay. Right? And other companies are paying good money for your time to come and share your expertise. So I want people to know, like, out of transparency, I want people to know that. And I want people to know that when they see my name affiliated with a company, especially now in 2025, that usually means I'm getting paid, unless it's higher ed, right? Like I'll go talk to any college class and give back to the PhD students and grad students because that's something I feel passionate about. Certain other nonprofit groups and things like that. But like if you see my name with a for-profit company, you can assume that they are paying me for my time.
And yeah, it's really interesting. So I had this the year when the first time we did sponsored content here on the channel. And I and ahed for a lot. Like, how do I do this? Because I find that companies want as little as possible, but legal broadly. I want as much as possible, probably too much. So it's like, where do we sort of find the line in the middle? For me,
Sure.
it was top and tail and that kind of thing. But what I'm thinking now is that there'll probably be like they'll in any particular video there'll still be that. But I'm thinking there'll also be like on my LinkedIn page, but also on here like a like a statement of interest that I'll just keep up to date with a kind of these are my current ongoing relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel like it's not always like they've sponsored this video. It's like, people are aware I'm doing these webinars for Thirst at the minute, and we've done one every month for the last 3 months. I think we're going to do at least another few. And it's really cool. They basically let me decide what topic I think would be really interesting to talk about. I go out and find an interesting guest. Heidi did the one literally this week. It was this
I
week,
did.
wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
Wednesday, yeah. They just kind of let us go for an hour, which is marvelous. And most importantly, and this was kind of one of my, this has got to be how this is, they make sure that guests are paid for their expertise and their time that they bring to the talk. It's a really good collaboration in which we don't talk about their product. They don't ask us to talk, we never have to do go to the Thirst website after this webinar, and they're super cool about no, this is just about spreading expertise. Now, obviously, there's business benefit to being attached to that. Of course, there is.
Of course.
Companies do company stuff. But I think it's really important, like you just said, to be really open about like what that relationship is. Because otherwise it's just weird, because I don't work there.
Yeah.
So that's then. But my point was more that they aren't sponsoring this episode of the ID Update. But if you'd like to sponsor an episode of the ID Update, reach out. No.
Listen, always be selling. I was just telling my freelancing L&D friends this yesterday. Always be selling. For the right price, anyone can sponsor anything.
This is it. But I am now talking about their company.
Right.
And I think, granted, in this context, I'm explaining what the agreement is, so it's slightly different anyway. But if I was saying, oh, Thirst have done this cool thing because we're talking about, I don't know, AI skills mapping or whatever, any feature that I happen to think, oh, they do it particularly well. I think it's important that if people are, in any way uncertain, they could be able to go, oh, there is a relationship there, but it isn't in relation to this, and it isn't in relation to this video. That, I think that's increasingly important, as you say, in a space where a lot of people don't disclose, oh, by the way, that's an affiliate link, or what their relationship with the company is. That can be tricky, but at the same time, like I say, I don't know if it's just kind of over concern and over care.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just watching our live chat, and do people really give a shit? Because we've lost like half of our viewers as we've started to talk about this. So maybe people just don't really care.
If so, care. It's important.
It is important. It is important because especially if you aspire to be in that world, right? If you want to start being paid for your expertise, you have to be really careful, because I learned this the hard way. And I now have an agreement that I wrote for new partnerships, sponsorships, new events, right? Like it's a collaboration agreement. And I wrote it because I did a webinar with this group, and they said, oh, we're going to like have a host and they're going to do a little plug for our product. They did not tell me that in the middle of my presentation, they were going to stop everything and get people to pay $20 right now to secure your spot in our like class of how to use our product. Oh, like I saw my face turn completely red on the camera, and I was just like, this is not my brand. This is not my vibe. This is not how I do things. I was furious. And I ended up not saying anything because I spoke to a friend who had joined, and he was like, you know what? I got that it was like just their spiel, right? Like he was like, I knew it had nothing to do with you. I knew it was just their thing. Like, cause I was like, do I issue a public apology? Like, what do I do? And he was like, no, it's not that serious. Nobody's going to care. Like, they just know it's like people pushing sales. But it still felt so gross. And they actually reached out to me after not honoring like the revenue agreement that we had. Like, they didn't tell me that my revenue agreement didn't apply for those $20 things that they were selling during the call.
Right.
Which is bananas to me, because you're literally selling on the call where my face and my people have joined, right? Like my network has joined. And then you're telling me that that is not the revenue that you were talking about. And they asked me to do more. And so I sent a nastygram and was like, you did this thing, right? And it was out of line. And you need to warn people if you're going to do that. And I don't work with people who I don't feel trust with, and I have zero trust with you.
Do you know what? I think that's the most important thing to my mind, is that like whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's this channel, whether it's these chats that we have, anything like that, my priority is to make sure that people can listen to it, and whether they agree with the crap that I'm spouting that particular month or not, they know that it's trustworthy in the sense that it's my thought.
Sure.
Or if it's not my thought, I'll tell you when I'm stealing someone else's idea. Generally, it's because it sounds really good compared to the rest, and I'll go, "Oh, I stole that from whose book?" Oh God, I was going to say, I'll just use the name on the book in front of me. It's got like 30 freaking authors on the front cover. Unhelpful, people. Give me a lead author. That's what I need. And I can't read the editor's name, unfortunately, so you get missed as well. Anyway. Literally, the whole front cover is just a list of the people's work with a little coloured block next to them. It's like, what is it? Contemporary theories of learning. This is the benefit of moving. You find books you haven't read in a while, and you realise you should read them again.
So you set them on your desk, never to be read again.
Largely, yes, because next to it was the War Games Illustrated magazine. That's already been read twice today, and it arrived this morning. Whereas the book sits there unopened since I moved it.
Amazing, I love it.
I think that closes off our ramble through EdTech, though, because I'd like to get into our second topic, the second education exodus. You brought this one up, Heidi. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So from the little, like whisperings that I hear throughout the industry, it had seemed that the teachers transitioning into instructional design had cooled off a little bit in the last kind of year to year and a half, right? Yep. I was hearing some things about how there's like some of the people who their target audience is transitioning teachers have been struggling to keep that audience and that momentum from the pandemic, because of course, teachers were trying to leave the classroom during the pandemic. Who could blame them? But we now have this lovely situation in the United States where the Department of Education is at risk. And people are already being laid off from the Department of Education, and that trickle-down effect is going to be extremely real. And I think we're going to see another wave of educators trying to get out of the classroom because of whatever happens next, right? And so I think you brought up a good point that we need to talk a little bit about lessons learned from the first time around. And I mean, I don't think I'm going to say anything that I haven't been saying for the last 4 or 5 years. I always caveat this by saying that I've helped hundreds of transitioning teachers for free to get into the learning and development space. I post a lot of content that is aimed at helping them get into the space, but I will not say that there's any shortcut. Right. And I won't let educators gatekeep my posts. And that happens sometimes, right? I'll post something about like what instructional design, in my opinion, should be or needs to be or needs to prioritize. And I get the comments every time that are like, well, that's why you should hire teachers because we're this, that, and the other. And I say, hold on a minute. I'm not going to let you gatekeep this post. Anyone can become an instructional designer. It is not specially designed for teachers. It's not specially geared towards anyone, right? And I think one of the biggest lessons that we need to have and that we need to talk about if we're talking about lessons learned is that teaching is not synonymous with instructional design. And people get hella pissed every time I say that. They bring out their pitchforks. They call me a gatekeeper. They call me every name in the book. And I don't give a shit because you're wrong. Okay. Teaching and instructional design are not the same. And I've never been a K through 12 teacher, but I have been a college professor. And not even that is the same. We're talking about adult learning, right? Because everyone always brings up, well, pedagogy versus andragogy. Okay, no, I don't even care about that. That's not even the difference, right? The difference is the approach. The difference is the perspective. The difference is corporate culture, right? And there's a million other differences. And it's very funny to me, the people who like dig in their heels and say that I'm a gatekeeper and that I'm wrong, they're the people that have no interest in upskilling, right? They have no interest in learning what instructional design actually is because they want an easy in, they want an easy path. And that is why boot camps are as popular as they are and why people keep shelling out their money for very shitty boot camps that if all you have to do is go on Reddit, type in the name of that boot camp and you will see all the stuff you need to know about it, right? I'll pause there. I could go on for 3 hours.
It is interesting. It's got to be said. And I think just like last time, it is more of a US phenomenon than it is common here in the UK. It does happen here in the UK, but I think it is a much smaller movement here. The things that always surprise me about it, and first of all, I'll caveat this with, I hate seeing teachers move into L&D. Not because they're bad at it, but because we need really good teachers. Largely because a lot of teachers aren't really good teachers. It's having, I always say I was very lucky. I happened to go to school at a time in the UK where teaching was on a bit of an upswing. I got mostly really fantastic teachers, and certainly all the points that kind of really matter. I got really good teachers. I got 3 younger siblings, 2 of them significantly younger, 1 slightly younger. Didn't get that. They got what I would describe as largely awful fucking teachers who should be sacked, but can't be because they're teachers. It's not tenure like I think it is often in the US and that kind of thing. It's just there's such a shortage of teachers forever that unless they really go off the deep end, teachers don't get sacked. They just shuffle from school to school, failing more kids as they go, because they seem to, for some reason, hate children, making teaching a phenomenally stupid choice. But that's, all of that aside, I'm going to make a very flawed assumption that every teacher that wants to move into L&D, I'm going to say rather than just instructional design specifically, is a great teacher. That means we're losing something incredibly important, and actually fucks over L&D a little bit because we're somewhat reliant on a fairly well-educated workforce arriving on the front door, because we are not workplace education departments. I still remember the first time in a training room, I got someone who started in a job, and it wasn't actually me, I was running the team, came to me and they went, I've got a trainee who has never used a keyboard and mouse before. I was like, I'm sorry, what? It's like, oh yeah, they've just always used iPads. So they have no concept of how to work with the keyboard and mouse and a normal computer. And it's like, oh shit, we're going to have to teach basic IT skills to this person.
Yeah.
that is what a lack of really good, not even just good, just passable foundational educational skills gives us in L&D. So we lose that. But I do also think that, especially right now, like we're seeing, the space isn't in a great spot. If people are flooding to L&D because of the amazing salaries and fantastic working conditions, I'm not sure which part of the industry you're looking at. But could I have some of it, please? It's
That's the thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. That's the promise of a lot of these programs, is that
Mm.
you can have financial freedom, that you can make six figures, that you can, and one of the biggest problems that I have is with one particular boot camp that says you can make six figures, but they also used to sponsor, they don't anymore after it had been called out multiple times, but they used to sponsor a salary survey. And the salary survey said that the average salary was around 70 grand, but yet they were promising six figures. And so the salary survey was antithetical to their marketing, right? So they cut the survey, of course, and just kept pushing the marketing, financial freedom, baby. And then I also found out today that one of these academies, if you will, I use the term loosely, is telling their newbies to start their own LLC as a first step, and then call themselves and whatever it is they want to be, to break into that field, right? There's nothing illegal about that, right? And I think people should start their own LLC if they intend to run their own business. But it's really unethical, because what they're setting people up for is an abject failure to find full-time work. Because I'm sure you've experienced this, and I have too, because we both have bounced back and forth between freelance and full-time, right?
Yep.
And it's hard to bounce back and forth, right? Freelance is like something that you do initially. Well, for me anyway, initially it was out of desperation that I couldn't find full-time work. So I just picked up a contract here, picked up a contract there. Luckily had a friend that was good enough, kind enough to tell me to start an LLC years ago. So that when that inevitably happened, I would say, oh yes, I've had this business since such and such year, right? But marketing, and it's not just that program. I've heard of other programs encouraging people to market themselves as a freelance instructional designer to get their foot in the door, or to lie about their experience. And instead of putting teacher on their LinkedIn, to put instructional designer at, Madison local school. Sorry, I'm just using my own hometown school as an example. But the thing is that is setting you up for failure, because first of all, it's a lie. Lying about your job title is a lie, is a lie, is a lie, is a lie. It's not bending the truth. And you can convince yourself however you want that, oh, well, because I designed instruction, that makes me an instructional designer. No, because if somebody calls your employer for job verification and they say, was so-and-so an instructional designer at this school, the answer is probably going to be no. They'll be like, what? No, they're a teacher, right? Because there are very few. There are fewer instructional designers in K-12 than are being marketed on LinkedIn. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And again, maybe it's, I'm not sure if it's a US versus UK thing. We just don't have that. Like you're if you work at a school and you teach people, you're a teacher. That's the job title. When the first time I came across people calling themselves educators, I had to check in and go, is that teacher? It is. Cool. Sweet. That's fine.
That's fine.
Just wanted to know, because it wasn't terminology I was familiar with. And it, like the last time round, the most regular bit of feedback I was giving in interviews was just like, just tell me what you did. Like, you're trying really hard when you don't need to.
Yeah.
Like, do you think teaching's a bad thing? No. Then why won't you tell me you were a teacher? Like,
right.
I'm not going to hold that against you. I may hold your lack of experience in the corporate environment against you, because you have a lack of experience in the corporate environment. If your portfolio is crap, I will hold that against you. But I'm not going to go, oh, well, your job title was this, therefore you can't possibly do this job. I think we are past that point. We don't
Yeah.
most good hiring managers kind of don't care what the job title was in most scenarios. Like my
Yeah.
first job title was trainer. It's not exciting. And yet there it was on my CV. Trainer. What do you do? I delivered the same induction week after week after week. Therefore, I have all the following skills that I can demonstrate to you of facilitation and training room management and follow up and in one-on-one coaching, etc., etc., etc. The argument of saying call yourself a teacher if you're a teacher is not to say you have no skills. It's to say
Right.
just call your skills what they are.
Right.
You know, your class of like 8-year-old kids were not stakeholders.
No. Neither are the parents, neither are the administration, none of those people are subject matter experts. Stop trying to pretend
Yeah.
that it is comparable, because that is actually, most people don't realize that that's actually a red flag for a hiring manager like me, right? And I have hired teachers fresh out of the classroom as IDs before. And my title was adjunct English professor. And I had that title when I got an instructional designer position at NASA. So it is possible. It is probable if you know how to talk about it and you're not ashamed. But I think it's these programs, right, in their very aggressive advertising, because this is where I'm seeing that messaging coming from, is not just in L&D, but like transitioning teacher programs in general are like, be ashamed. Don't talk. Nobody wants to hear about your teaching expertise. And if you pay me money, I can teach you how to ditch it. And it's like, every teacher I know is a commendable human. Every teacher I know is a commendable human. Either whether or not they're a shit teacher, the ones that I'm friends with are commendable humans, right? And there's no need for them to be ashamed. Why would you be ashamed that you can wrangle 38-year-olds? That's a fucking skill. That's a skill I don't have.
No, this is it, and it's a strange thing that at the same time it'll be you have all these transferable skills. You're ideally placed to be a trainer. Blah 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 blah. But you must never use the language that you know and are comfortable with, because it's a red flag to hiring managers. It's like there is very little you can say where one word is going to, be, oh, well, that's it. I can't hire this person. Unless the sentence starts with a 1930s German dictator's name followed by wasn't actually and some other words, you're pretty much fine to say what you want in an interview. If you're used to saying, oh, I taught people rather than I trained people, say that, because you haven't trained anyone, but you have taught hundreds of kids.
Right. And that does count.
Yeah. I know seasoned L&D professionals that will sometimes say, oh, yeah, I taught them about this. That word is not it doesn't set alarms off around every instructional design department. Go, there's a teacher in the building, and we have to run and get them out in case they get their teaching all over everything.
Throw a net over them,
This is it, and it kind of feels like that sometimes. Those barriers are entirely imaginary. In my opinion, there's probably some L&D hiring manager somewhere that's a bit of a dick.
Oh no, there's definitely. I've seen the dicks on LinkedIn for sure. They exist, and they're like I would never hire a teacher. Every teacher I've seen is terrible at instructional design, and you know what?
So are most instructional designers.
Listen, yeah. Yeah. But also, like, you don't want to work for that asshole anyway.
This is it. No.
Find somebody who you do want to work for.
And I make that comment because when I look back, for at least the first 3 or 4 years of my career in L&D, I was shit.
Me too.
But I made awful stuff that did not achieve what it needed to achieve. But
I was just
it was L&D, so you just get away with it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, in the same way that there are terrible teachers teaching and there are terrible police people policing, there are terrible L&D professionals L&Ding.
Yes, and there's research. Remember Dr. Hardman's
Mm,
research on the novice instructional designer using AI versus the seasoned instructional designer? People thought the seasoned instructional designer was AI because they thought that person's work was so suboptimal. That's the kind word I'll use.
this is it. It's again, it's not an easy generalization. Just as all teachers don't make great IDs, not everyone with an ID or a senior ID or a head of L&D job is good at their job.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
uh,
true.
which is why I always kind of to get a little bit frustrated when it is that, oh, being a teacher makes you the perfect fit for, and being an instructional designer. It's like, no, it makes you the perfect fit for whatever job you want to go on to do.
Yes.
Like you want
Yes.
to go, you like computers, go work in IT. You have a
Yeah,
whale of a time. And
absolutely.
you'll probably be the most socially functional person in the department, and every IT team needs one of those. So
And
that's
everyone will come to you. Job
yeah,
security.
this
Done.
this is it. Your past job is not an indication of what your future job needs to be,
No,
nor does
no.
it make you the perfect fit, as it were, for another job. You know, I've gone into jobs before where someone's approached me and say, "Hey, we'd love to give you." This is one of my bounces into employment versus self-employment. Right? We've got this perfect role. You'd be the perfect fit. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. It's like what you do on YouTube. It's like what you do with the podcast. Blah blah blah. Get into the role. Terrible fit. Doesn't work at all.
Yeah,
You could argue that it's all the things I currently do, but with a more sort of together job title kind of thing, doesn't work. And it's the
sure.
same for this, going from, 1+1 when it comes to careers does not always equal 2. Sometimes it equals, redundancy after 3 months or
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
So no, I think I want to move us on a little bit because I guess I've got a question to take us to the next bit of the conversation, which is we absolutely don't want people to lie. We absolutely don't want people to be ashamed of where they're coming from versus where they're going to, or feel that one necessarily shapes the other. So, well, two questions. Let's take them one at a time. The first one: what do we want to see from as hiring managers in this context? And I'd be interested in the comments if anyone else has got ideas on this as well. What do we want to see from a teacher coming to us for their first L&D role?
I want to back up for just a second
Oh, go for it.
because I think if some teachers that are aspiring IDs watch this, they're going to be a little bit confused because there is some hate around the teacher space and it mostly lives on Reddit, right? And has bled over a little bit into LinkedIn where there's like, if a teacher posts, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting into instructional design" on the instructional design subreddit, they are immediately just like creamed. People are like, "It's a terrible time. It's a terrible job market. You should go somewhere else." Like basically it's like, "Get out of here. Go somewhere else," right? But that is not how hiring managers feel. And I just really want to like bring that up and lead into this next question with that is that is that's a lot of bitter people. And typically the people who are saying nasty things about teachers entering instructional design are the shitty instructional designers that you're talking about. They're people who have a reason to be afraid for their job security. Because I mean, I don't care. Like if every teacher in America joins instructional design tomorrow, I'm not afraid that they're going to take my job. I've had a lot of experience and I'm just not afraid of that. Right. So I want to lead with that. But what are hiring managers looking for? They're looking for effort. I'm going to start they're looking for effort first. And what I mean by that is, how are you going? Here's where I am now. Here's where I want to be. And these are the steps that I'm taking to get there. And a portfolio that has been templated from a person that sells portfolio programs that they all look the same. Like our friend was, oh gosh, now I can't think of her name. Like our friend was commenting, I'd have to open LinkedIn and look. She shared that article about transitioning teachers today. I think it's Krista. She was talking about how She in interviews would get 10 of the same applicants and portfolios. Their portfolios all looked exactly the same. I've also seen like a very big uptick in people borrowing other people's portfolio projects, changing like 2 tiny things and then claiming it as their own. And that's cool. Like that's whatever. But I really need people to understand as a hiring manager, and this is true of a lot of other hiring managers I've spoken to, we don't even look at your portfolio until after the phone screen and after we've looked at your resume. Like your resume is first. That is the first. When I'm hiring a team, the first thing I look at is all the resumes, right? I look for what I'm trying to fill, right? And the reality is I can't always hire someone who's brand new to instructional design, right? And so in that case, a lot of the time I will have to prioritize people that have more experience, right? And people who have years of experience, right? But if not, I'm looking for certain things, right? Depending on the projects, depending on the roadmap, depending on my strategy, depending on how I'm leading that team. And if I'm able to find those things in someone who is an educator, cool, awesome. Then I will have the recruiter phone screen that person to make sure that they at least know enough about the industry to be able to hold a conversation. And sometimes that falls flat, right? And those are the people I was kind of talking about earlier who are like, no, teaching and instructional design are the same thing, damn it. And then they're still looking for a job 8 months into their journey because they're not actually taking a journey. They're not actually doing anything to develop themselves. They just want in. They want the easy path. They go, why won't you hire me? Why won't anyone take a chance on me? It's because they're not showing growth, right? They're not showing that professional development. When I moved from college professing, is that what you call that? College professorship? I don't know. College professing into instructional design. There was no teacher transition program back then. This was before that was a thing. So I was listening to podcasts. I was networking as much as I could. I was reading books. I had started my PhD program. I was doing all of these different things that I could show and talk about in an interview that is, I want this role. And so I think in not only showing what you've been doing, but also like having the desire and showing that desire in a way where you want this more than the next person, right? And that you are intentional, right? Because the other thing I see a lot is people go, well, I don't care what job I get in L&D. I just want out of teaching. Oof, you're going to have a really rough time finding a job because that is not what hiring managers want to hear. Because for us, we're talking about risk again. That's a big risk, right? That's a big business risk. Because if I hire you and you don't really like you're not really sure, you haven't done the research, you may not like this at all. And you might be gone in 2 months. And I would rather choose somebody who's taken the time to learn what the job is about and what they would be expected to do and says, yes, I want to do that, than somebody who is just like, I want a job in L&D. I'll shut up now.
No, I think that's a really interesting point because I come at this from like when I hire for my business, it's a small business. Like the couple of times we've hired, it's been like, it's this role. This is the role we need. There is a significant gap in our business to the point where I'm willing to take on the risk of exposing my business, i.e. my customers, to somebody new. Now, the experience of scaling that is fucking terrifying. Because especially the first couple of people, it is like, it's not me anymore. I am no longer going to be doing everything. And what I can't do is check everyone's work. I'm hiring because I can't do the thing, you know, or I can't do the volume or whatever. So I can't then check it. So it's, understanding the level of trust that is being put into you when someone hires you is colossal.
Yeah.
You are already a substantial risk to a business in your first 3 months in it. So you do need to offer up mitigations to that risk. The first one is being trustworthy and truthful, etc., etc., etc. But actually caring about the individual job, to me, is the single most important thing.
Yeah.
The people that get almost always a very curt kind of, no, thank you, we're not progressing your thing, no further feedback will be made available to you, is because it is painfully obvious in their application for the role that they could not give a crap about the role or my business. They just want a job.
Yes.
Quite notably, everyone in the business today had a fairly substantial reason for wanting that job. And so I think one of the biggest things I've noted, and this is true actually of a lot of them, if, for instance, when we recruit, we don't recruit often, just to clarify, it's been a couple of people over a few years. The business was its biggest at 8 people. We've shrunk since then, so that's fine. But we allow people to send us a whole bunch of stuff. We're like, hey, send us a video introducing yourself, talking about why you think you'd be a good fit. We don't actually ask for a portfolio. We ask for, send us the piece of work you're most proud of and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
And the first interview is actually just talk to us about that bit of work you sent us. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. And that is a huge stumbling block, I find, for a lot, or was a huge stumbling block. It's been over a year since we recruited.
Sure.
So this is slightly out of date. But they really struggled to talk about work they were proud of. And it struck me that the only one who didn't straight up said, this is a program I put together for a whole bunch of other teachers to help improve professional standards in our school, because there was really bad we got a really terrible report. So I put this together to help sort of spread best practice from other schools into our school, blah, blah, blah. Clearly loved the work that she had done. Was just happy to get the opportunity to share it.
Sure.
And didn't dress it up as anything that it wasn't.
Yeah.
Was just really straight about the whole thing. Gave us the context, gave us the feedback, the response it had got. That's lacking in most instructional design portfolios from experienced instructional designers. I don't care if you can draw a pretty picture. I want to know how it landed. Teachers can usually actually provide that information better than a lot of L&D professionals can, but they rob themselves of it by trying not to be teachers.
Exactly.
You have vast quantities of impact data from years of teachers' nights or, test results. I know you can't say, Timmy got an A+ because of me, but, broadly what your test result curves are or whatever that might be. You usually have really good impact data behind your effectiveness in the classroom. Talk to us about it. I know. And I get that not every hiring process looks like that. But when you see a hiring process that gives you the opportunity to talk about your work, actually do it.
Yeah.
And don't fill your portfolio with e-learning. If most of your experience is stood in a training room or a classroom talking to people, fill your portfolio with that. Because that's a skill. Facilitation, training, and teaching are different skills, and that's absolutely fine. But they have a lot of crossover. Not universal, but you can step from one to the other far more easily. And I think a lot of e-learning developers could step into a training room.
Sure. I think you bring up a really good point too about portfolios in general. And it's that they're not required by most hiring managers in the format that we are telling new people that they are required, right? Like, especially in the boot camp sector, right? It's like the portfolio has to be a website that has your picture and then it has this and then it has, and that's lovely. That's nice. If you can do that, if you can take the time to do that, that's wonderful. Yeah. But my portfolio has always been a Google Drive folder full of random shit that I have done. And I start with one document that says, start here. And it explains what you'll find in that folder. And then I've reduced that even further in more recent years to like a 1-minute trailer of just some walkthroughs of different projects that I've done. So you can get the aesthetics, and it's like me voiceovering like, oh, this is a project that I did for this thing. And it is like not the highest quality video because I'm not applying to jobs where I'm editing video. So it is like, pretty casual video. And I'm just like, hey, this is this project. But in each one, I am explaining what it is. I'm explaining what I did, who it was for. And I think that that's what's missing. People focus more on a website, on having like a website. And like, we're not web developers. You do not need to know how to use Squarespace or Webflow or Google Sites to be an instructional designer. I have not used any of those skills outside of my own business. And usually when people want to see your work samples, they don't really care in what format they get them. I've gotten PowerPoints with links. That's fine. I've gotten links in an email. That's fine. I've gotten Google Drive folders myself. That's fine. It's a really nice way too to password protect your work so that you can share some proprietary projects with future like potential employers in a safe way, right? So I think that there's some misconception around that. But I always, always, always give the advice that you have to tell why, right? And to your point, if your portfolio is full of e-learning, and that e-learning could have been an email, that e-learning could have been a job aid, that e-learning is not appropriate as an e-learning, that is like a boom to me as a hiring manager, right? I am not going to hire you if you have an e-learning on, I always use this example because I just think it's funny, how to train a puppy, because no human in their right mind is going to stop what they're doing while a puppy is pissing on the floor and open an e-learning. Hold on, there's an e-learning for this. And I have to take it right now. And they open this e-learning on how to train a puppy. And they're like, oh, hold on, puppy. Stop peeing on the floor for 2 minutes. I got to click next to continue. Hold on, I got to pass this assessment with an 80%. Or something that's like really small and rudimentary. Like I see all the time, like things that are akin to how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I would not hire this person because they would make an e-learning out of everything. And that's not what I want.
Do you know what? This is it. And I feel like this is actually the biggest reason to not do a website. Creating a website when you don't know what you're doing is the best way to indicate you don't know what you're doing.
It's true.
It's true. Building a website is not a small, building a good website is not a small undertaking. UX, UI, the technical skills required, the design skills required. You're adding a lot of burden and a lot of opportunity to make someone go, well, if they design that, like if they think this is how interaction should work, this worries me. The classic is I go up to click on portfolio, and a drop down menu appears out of it like it's 1995, and when using Windows front page, remember that for creating web pages? It's like, oh my god, what is this? But people, it's a nice easy way of navigating. It's like, is it? Would you design that in e-learning? Oh, well, no, I wouldn't design it for e-learning because of blah blah blah. It's like, so why have you put it on the website?
Yeah.
Because you forget that you are literally creating another example of your work when you're creating that. And that can be awesome if you're good at it. If you're not, there's a like I can put together a decent website. I trained to do that, blah, blah, blah. I still use a PDF for my portfolio.
Sure.
So there you go. There is no interactivity in my portfolio. There are some screenshots and a lot of writing. And the writing is, what was the brief? What did I have available? What was the timeline? What was the solution? Why did I decide this was the solution? And what was the result? Mostly text, couple of images. That's it. The occasional joke and a little cartoon character giving a thumbs up. And then my contact details at the end. That's because that's sufficient.
Yeah.
And that has proven sufficient for over, a long time. I
think that's a good point because a lot of people think you need like these flagship projects and things that are really big and built out and everything. And I spend about 3 to 5 minutes per candidate on their portfolio because that's all I have time for. And so I'm not going through your whole e-learning. I don't care. I don't care how good it is. It might be the best e-learning I've ever seen. I don't have time to go through all of it. I'm jumping around. And if I can't jump around, out. If you're locking navigation, out. And I know some people are pro locking navigation, but that's not me. If you're locking navigation on your portfolio, you're not getting hired.
Yeah. By all means, join the business and have the argument with me on a real project. But yeah, not on your portfolio. That's showing a fundamental lack of thinking about the end user.
Yes.
What that's actually demonstrating is inability to do the job.
Exactly.
And I think that's almost trained in a lot of, whether it's boot camps, whether it's just general online advice. This is kind of the downside to a world where everyone's like, here's a free template for this. That is on paper very, very helpful, except for the fact that every time I recruit for a role, I get 6 identical applications. You know, it would almost be better to go, like you say, scrap the website, stop doing, what was it, the capstone projects?
Flagship.
And it's kind of like that's not what we do. We just do work. Like, if someone asked me what my flagship project was, it'd be like, oh, I don't know, I guess this YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Like,
Great.
When a lot of people ask kind of, oh, where's the easiest place for me to see the sort of stuff you do? It's like, oh, let's go look at YouTube. There's the link. Load some videos. You'll get a feel for what it's like to work with me. Could you put up with this? That's that's usually the biggest barrier. But actually, that's kind of the next thing non-portfolio related that I would like to see from people looking for the roles is engagement in the space beyond their current job search.
Ooh.
Like, if you're interested in a topic, show me you're interested. Whether it's, I'm not gonna say everyone needs to become like a daily LinkedIn poster or anything like that, but what are you doing? Are you attending conferences? Are you going on courses? Are you reading books? Are you going to podcasts? Are you engaging with people in the community who are always people offering like, book some time with me and have a half-hour chat or whatever? Are you doing those things? Because you can always tell the difference in those who are and those who aren't, and whether or not they're willing to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
We have a good comment here.
Oh, what have we got? Oh, it's Phil. Hey, Phil. A good portfolio is much like a good versus bad CV. Good one state the impact and outcome. Bad one states the things you did. Oh, yes, responsible for making courses. Yep. Hey, this is, or how many courses? Oh, well, I've made over 100 courses. Oh, well, you must be good then.
Right. I'm just cranking them out every week.
Yeah, but this is the stuff that happens, right?
I know.
Because in lieu of impact data, we start talking about outputs. I created X many e-learnings. I created X many job aids. Funny enough, we see it in the EdTech space. We have over 1,000 courses available in our library. It's like, great, I need 3.
Yes.
Do I have to buy all of them, or can I just buy the, again,
can I have
3 that I need?
I really want to know what your second question was going to be, because we only have 6 minutes left. You said my first question is, what do hiring managers want to see?
For them, yes. Let me do the second question. I forgot I had a second question. Let's do this as a what's the one thing rather than just an open question. Okay. What's the one thing we should all be doing as L&D professionals to make this better than last time? Because my personal opinion is that last time, where lots of teachers joined the space, lots of people were responsible for it not always going smoothly, but there was probably blame to go around. So what should we all be doing, do you think, to support people coming into the space?
That's a really good question. Because I think all right, I'm going to say that I think this starts at the very, very top. This starts at the executive level of L&D, is that you need to be hiring managers and directors who understand L&D, because that is who you need leading a team, especially if your team is going to be open to hiring people who are new. if they are going to be open to mentoring and coaching people who are new. If you're going to have a team of 5 people and you're going to expect 3 of those people to mentor someone new, then you need to know what you're doing. And there's way too many L&D managers that don't know. And again, I don't care where you come from. What I care about is these L&D leaders that have no desire and no interest in learning about what we do and learning about what it is supposed to be about. They just go, yeah, you guys make courseware. I get it. Go make your courseware and leave me alone. And sure, this portfolio is gorgeous and pretty, and I love it. And it has flowers on it. So I'm hiring this person. Like, we need to own that we are the reason why there are crappy instructional designers. And I say we as like leaders, right? Especially at the executive and top levels. We need to own that we are responsible for the crappy instructional designers and the crappy, because a lot of teams, I had, I know it's such a long answer and it's only one thing. But I have had a lot of clients in the last year and a half who've reached out and wanted me to come in and do instructional design fast because they know I'm very experienced and they know that I can, because they've made bad hires during the pandemic. They hired people who they thought were good based on portfolios, who either had help, maybe ripped them off completely, or just were able to talk a good game. And then once they got into the roles, they didn't know what they were doing. And instead of removing those people and replacing them with talented people that had the skills, they just moved them. They said, oh, let's have you do LMS admin. Oh, let's have you just facilitate. Oh, let's just have you do, like, look at the wall and tell people what the wall says. But they had them doing anything but instructional design. And then they want to hire contractors to then do that work. We can't keep doing that shit. It's not effective. And it makes our reputation even worse than it was before.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think from my perspective, one of the things we need to do is what I benefited from when I was getting started was there were a lot of people who would very, very freely lend their time to others.
Yeah.
And I say this acknowledging how freaking difficult that is. But they made significant time, and they were, broadly speaking, on the more senior end.
Yes.
It was people like Michelle Perry Slater, Nigel Payne, it was Clark Quinn, it was lots of people who were senior then and senior now in the space, were giving their time very freely, and many of them still do now, to be clear.
Yeah.
What I've seen less of is the people who they gave their time freely to doing the same when they got to further on in their career.
True.
And it's not universal. Like, some people do give a lot of their time, and some people cannot give a lot of their time for many, many reasons. But I think it should be a constant internal challenge to us to remember that a lot of us benefited from people's goodwill, and it is, I think, incumbent on us to not just bitch that the industry isn't where it should be, but to actively try and fix that. Yes, some of the conversations are infuriating. But the only way we stop that infuriating approach or thought or pattern or whatever sort of disseminating into the workforce is by having the conversation and going, absolutely, actually, you've misunderstood, or I might suggest you read or look at or whatever, and just take the time out to pass on that time that we were given.
Sure.
And it's something that I've gone through patches of doing and then not doing and trying to do again. I'm trying to do it again at the minute, but I would say it's really difficult. Like, people that have consistently done it for 20 years, I don't get how. Like, it's tiring and it's time consuming and it's often thankless. But I think if all of us, if everyone with more than a decade's experience in the industry said, I am going to give an hour a month to random people, whether it's 10-minute calls or 1-hour calls to one person, whatever, I think the industry would leap forwards like ridiculously far in a relatively short period of time.
And it doesn't have to be one-to-one. It can be, you know, like my way of doing that now is publishing blogs and publishing articles and publishing like large things to many people that I think would be beneficial, right? But that's all I can give right now, and that's fine.
But it's finding the thing that you can give, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's, you know, that's why, for instance, like there's a Patreon for this YouTube channel, but the videos aren't just for them. They get them 2 days early and then they're free for everyone. That's the idea, is that it's a manageable way of giving back to the industry. And I think everyone needs to find that thing, and it doesn't need to be weekly videos. It doesn't need to be really big blog posts. It could be, hey, there's a 15-minute slot in my calendar. Would anyone like it?
Yeah.
You know, that I think is really powerful.
Agreed.
Those are my 2 questions. So we finished very nearly on time. We're a minute over. So that's not too bad. So that brings us, I think, to the end. We didn't get anywhere close to doing questions. So we'll save those for next month.
It's fine.
Unsurprisingly.
We'll just do a whole AMA next month. We won't even plan anything.
Well, that sounds dangerous. We won't get any questions then.
I know.
Awesome. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for joining today. These are always great fun. Thank you to everyone who's joined us as well. Please do let us know in the comments what you think about the EdTech situation, the acquisition space, or indeed the current space of people joining the industry from education. Perhaps there's another area you're seeing people join from. And if you've got any ideas on how we as an industry collectively can help people joining L&D get off to a better start, do share your thoughts as well. Other than that, though, we will see you next week for the next ID update at the end of April, the 4th month of the year, because it's flying past. Right. See you later.